If these are the only types of things you think about when I say the phrase practice routine, I'm going to challenge you to rethink how you organize your time in the practice room. What's up, everyone? Shawn Bill here. Thanks for tuning in this week. So this question of how we practice is really at the core of what I work on with many of my students. It's essential for us as trombone players, as brass players, as improvisers to think about these questions. Now, whether you're somebody like me who really likes an environment where there's lots of organization and lots of structure in my practice routine, or whether you like your practice environment to be a little bit more open, developing some sort of routine is going to help you maximize the time invested in the woodshed. Now, when we're considering developing a practice routine, it inevitably brings up the question of how much time should I be practicing? I think this is a reasonable question, but something that we've got to keep in mind when we're thinking in this direction is that no musician has as much time to practice as they would like. Whether your schedule is very busy, whether you're like me and you're a brass player and you have to be thinking about managing your chops if you have a practice goals, you have teaching responsibilities, you have other playing responsibilities, you've got to be sensible about how you invest that face time. So rather than thinking about looking for a magic number of how long should I practice, I would encourage you to think about A, what are my goals as a player, and B, how much time do I have open in my schedule? The intersection of these two things is going to tell you how much time you need to spend in the practice room. Once we've sorted out how much time we realistically can invest in the practice room, we've got to start to develop this routine. Now, for me, rather than thinking about what I quote unquote should practice, I really like to frame things in what are the non-negotiable elements of my playing that I always want to be there. For me, these non-negotiable items in my own playing are tone, time, intonation, playing with clear phrasing, and playing original music. These things set up a framework that all of the other elements that I include in my practice routine sort of revolve around and feed into. These items will surely be different for every player. How many might be different? I would say hopefully you have no more than maybe 5 or 7 or 8 of them, because otherwise they're really becoming negotiable items rather than non-negotiable items. But they should really be big picture items that really affect the center of how you want to function as a musician. Not necessarily just the nitty-gritty of technique or those sort of things, but big picture items. This way of organizing your practice is in contrast to the way many brass players would recommend. I know lots of great players who talk about hitting every element of their playing at every session. So this could include making time for long tones, lip slurs, articulation exercises, both single and double tonguing, upper register, lower register, loud playing, soft playing, all this sort of stuff. The list goes on of all these fundamental items. Now, these are certainly all important things to practice, but you have to think about, at least in my opinion, how they are feeding those non-negotiable items in your playing. Yes, you want to address all these things at some point, but do they need to be there every single day at the expense of possibly working on more musical items at more the forefront of your practice routine? Once we've figured out what those non-negotiable items are, we can start to develop our routine. Now, we're going to work a 45-minute routine today. Whether you want to practice for just one 45-minute session a day or you want to practice 4 hours a day, I think it's really important to divide your practice into these chunks. For example, I practice a couple hours every day. I divide it into a little bit of warm-up time that is sort of separate from everything else, and then I work in 2 45-minute chunks with a 15-minute rest in between them. So this idea of playing for a chunk of time and then having some rest is really important for us physically and honestly mentally as well. You can't absorb all that information. You just burn it all down straight through. So we're going to talk about a 45-minute practice session. You can sort of extrapolate this onto longer periods of time. So we're talking 45 minutes here. So our first 5 to 10 minutes is going to be warm-up. Now, I mentioned that I like to do my warm-up as a little bit separate. That's because I'm practicing over a longer period of time. But if you were just doing a 45-minute session, that first to 5-10 minutes should be warming up, working on some of the fundamental things that are A, going to get your face ready to play for the day, and B, going to have positive impacts on your overall brass playing. That's things like long tones. That's things like lip slurs. Even though just a second ago I was telling you to question whether you need to practice them, certainly some of those items you do need to practice. It's just a matter of how much time you invest in them. I like to do a warm-up that's pretty abbreviated because I really like to be able to do the exact same warm-up whether I'm warming up at home practicing, whether I may be out at a school, working with some students, whether I'm starting my day at a performance, I can always get that same warm up in, and then I feel nice and consistent with how my face feels. If I were to invest 30 minutes in a warm up routine, I couldn't get that in every day, especially when I'm out at a school teaching a jazz band rehearsal that maybe starts at 7 o'clock in the morning. Once you've done some warm-up activities, I like to devote an additional 5 to 10 minutes to other sort of technical type activities. These might be things like additional foundational things. These might be things like working on vocabulary, learning licks, maybe working on a technical aspect like the range or like the articulation. So again, I just a second ago was dogging all of these fundamental activities, but they're incredibly important. It's all just about keeping them in context and making sure they don't overtake the entirety of your practice routine. From there, once we invest that kind of foundational time in warm-ups and some technical practice, then you got to dig into some music. And for me, this is the important thing. It's all about keeping balance. I would say that it's more important to invest in musical practice versus purely technical practice. Now, you can practice technique through music, and actually what you want to do is you want to think about those non-negotiable items, how they are going to guide you in what musical selections you choose, and then sort of like how those musical selections you choose are going to feed in to the non-negotiable items that you think want to be prevalent in your playing. So that's the 45-minute routine. Now, I referenced some times with all these, 5 to 10 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes, whatever. I use a timer when I practice. I think it's a very effective way to help organize your practice. I do not work from a results-based approach with this. I don't sort of work on something until I feel like I'm better at it. I work on it for the time that I've specified I'm going to work on it. That is contrasting to what some other people would like to do. Results can be a good way to guide your practice as well. But, for me, I'm in a long-term relationship with this instrument. And so I'm less worried about the day-to-day progress and kind of forward and backward movement of how I'm feeling in a day. I'm more interested in setting up a process that I know is going to yield good results. For me, that's having this organized practice routine. That's having really clear direction of these non-negotiables. So I can think, I know I'm instilling a great process, so I trust that 2 months, 6 months down the road, I am going to sound better than I do today. Now, there's one final element I'd like to leave you with today. This comes from my friend Bobby Sharman, great bass player, great colleague and bandmate of mine. We were riding to a gig. This is maybe 8 months ago, almost a year ago. And we were just talking about practice, talking about playing. And I was sharing some of the challenges I was having in my own practice recently. And he asked me the question, well, Shawn, do you ever just have fun in your practice? And I thought about it and I was like, no, I don't. I'm really like always there to work and to be really keyed in on what I'm working on. And he's like, well, you just need to have more fun in your practice. And that really stuck with me. So I started to try to instill that into my practice. It might be just carving out some time to possibly play some original music. That's part of the reason why I started to make that as a non-negotiable. It might be something like playing with a recording rather than with a play along. So you can kind of, play along with Miles Davis or J.J. Johnson or Herbie Hancock. Might be doing something just like playing a tune that you really enjoy playing. Anyone that knows me knows that I'm not like a big like fun kind of guy. I'm easygoing, but I'm not sort of that like fun personality. That's just not really me. However, instilling some of this in my practice and carving out some time to really find that fun, quote unquote, was not just about like sunshine and lollipops. It was really about how do you connect with the positive energy of playing. That really has carried over into my playing when I'm performing, not just in the practice room. And that is really what my colleague was trying to get at, is if you can create that positive mindset in the practice room, then when it's time to play, it's like something, oh, I'm just here hanging out with my friends and we're making some music, versus feeling like, oh my gosh, I've got to pass a test. I've got to get these licks. I've got to have perfect intonation, all that sort of stuff. So give it a try, see what it does for you. Try all this practice organization stuff. It really does some great things for helping you feel like you have forward progress in your playing versus feeling like you're sort of like stuck in a loop or chasing your own tail because you're not so sure where you should be working in the practice room. Cool. We'll see you in the woodshed.